Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Impacts Podcast. I am your host, David Blackman. I'm here with Jim Welty, the president of the Marcellus Shale Coalition, the coalition that represents all the wonderful producers and other businesses related to the energy industry in the Appalachian area, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, with the world's biggest onshore natural gas play on earth, the Marcellus Shale. Jim, how you doing?
Doing fantastic, David. Great to see you again. Great to be on. Thanks for this opportunity. We've got a really good story to tell. Looking forward to telling it with you and chatting with you.
Yeah, boy, you do, man. What's the weather like up there right now?
And we love it because natural gas is delivering right now. I just checked this morning, and I think in the PJM grid, we got about 40% of the generation coming from natural gas, and well over 80% coming from thermal resources. So, it hasn't. Look, we had Winter Storm Firm came through in January. We had one of the coldest Januaries since 1988. And natural gas performed throughout that to ensure that the lights stayed on from electrical perspective, but the heat stayed flowing. A little over 50% of the homes in Pennsylvania are heated directly by natural gas. So that's a good thing because we're able to keep them nice, snug, and warm in this cold spell.
You don't have the same issues on the PJM grid that they have in ISO New England up north of y'all, where so many of the homes are heated with natural gas up there too, but they end up having to do fuel switching during these major winter storms from natural gas to fuel oil for power generation. And we had that situation on ISO New England. Over 40% in some days during that storm was generated with fuel oil, which is really kind of incredible when you think about it. Here in the United States on a grid that they love to brag about their green credentials and switch into renewables, and 40% of the power is being generated with fuel oil because they don't get enough natural gas supply from where? The Marcellus Shale, 125 miles away. I mean, it's the most incredible. I don't know. I'm sure that drives you crazy.
It does. I mean, here we are sitting on one of the largest shale gas reserves in the world, and we can't supply low-cost, clean fuel to our neighbors in the Northeast because of policies that are designed to cut off the infrastructure. Hopefully we're starting to see that turn. I think some of the governors up in New England are starting to recognize that their constituents are the ones that are really bearing the brunt of higher costs in times like these. And, hopefully we'll see, for example, Constitution Pipeline be reborn and get put in the ground so that we can supply them. But it is absurd that right now they're relying on Trinidad and Tobago to ship their gas into New England. I guess it's better than Russian gas several years ago, but still, we're right here. We've got enough gas here to be supplying domestically as well as our allies across the pond. But it is ridiculous. It really, really is. And honestly, David, it goes to the policies that you alluded to, and that is, they've been so keen on trying to push out fossil fuel generation that they did it despite their own constituents. And we saw that a little bit here in Pennsylvania. There's something called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a carbon tax on emissions from power plants. And we saw Pennsylvania's generation go from 5% portfolio of natural gas in 2005 to over 60% today, right? Because of the onset of Marcellus development. But most of those investments were between 2011 and 2019, about $15 billion of private investment to build those natural gas power plants. Yeah. That dried up in 2019 when then Governor Wolf entered Pennsylvania into RGGI. And investors said, we're not going to invest in Pennsylvania if you're going to tax the product that we're trying to create. So fortunately, we pulled out of RGGI. We're hoping to see more generation come online. But I say all that to say, New England has pushed out fossil fuel, and so they now have to rely on Pennsylvania and PJM to provide them the power during these times. So PJM becomes a net exporter of energy when it's cold snaps like this. And, a lot of that energy comes from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and and of course, New England was also relying on Quebec to send down some exported energy into there, but Quebec needed it for themselves, right? And so they didn't get that, and that made them even more reliant on the fuel oil. I mean, luckily, I don't want to badmouth fuel oil and those power plants. They're there for exactly this reason. But this is a situation. We're here in the United States in a modern developed country, and most countries that use fuel oil for their power grids are third world countries like Cuba, some of the Caribbean islands, and other parts of the country that aren't fully developed. Doing it here in the United States it's really kind of an antiquated means, and it just whenever that's happening here in the United States, it's because of things like this blockade that the state of New York has had on that Constitution pipeline. Basically,
Yeah.
it's really the only explanation. It's just crazy. Back to PJM though, I looked at the generation mix here in recent weeks, and it's amazing how steady natural gas is between 40 and 45% of total generation throughout this extreme cold, icy weather. And it's also kind of amazing how little renewables are actually on that grid in terms of wind and solar. In fact, solar is almost flatlined. Wind, does a little bit every day. But I just wonder, is there a big push in those states to build more wind and solar? Are there heavy subsidies for it? Or is it just not a really good area, particularly for wind, I guess, more than solar? Is it just not an ideal part of the country for that kind of generation?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. There's certainly a push to get more wind and solar online. And look, we'll be the first to say you need all resources available. But it's just logical sense that the most reliable energy source is natural gas, and you can't start promoting policies that pick winners and losers. When you've got the largest natural gas field under your feet, you've got the ability to generate energy like natural gas can in conditions like this. You're foolish to not want to promote that. We're starting to see that change from a policy perspective in the Northeast. Look, solar in particular doesn't work up here like it does down in Texas and in the South.
Right, obviously.
And that you need to be realistic about what the opportunity is when you're trying to build out demand, or excuse me, when you're trying to meet the demand that's growing. And that's what we're facing. We're facing ever growing demand. Every grid operator is. We're no different up here. There's a lot of focus on data centers and AI development in Pennsylvania. And there's only one way to really meet that in a very fast and efficient manner, and that's through natural gas generation.
Yeah, it's been very encouraging. Cleanview Partners and a couple other recent studies talking about how natural gas is emerging as the big winner in data center power provision. You can just do it more cheaply and quicker. And there's a lot of innovative solutions related to natural gas aside from just building a new combined cycle plant. There's all these other kinds of turbines that you can install quickly and get that gas generation online very quickly. So it's become the ideal solution, and it just makes perfect sense. One of the things I've been concerned about, and I wonder if you're seeing any of it in Pennsylvania, is, the investment for behind the meter power generation for the data centers. I've had a concern it could just kind of take away capital from the needed investment for base load on the grid. And I just wonder if there's any of those kinds of concerns popping up there in your region.
Yeah, there's a very keen focus on that, particularly within the PJM grid. And within Pennsylvania itself, our Public Utility Commission has a heightened focus on that as well. And I think there's an attempt from a policy perspective for a collaborative effort to ensure that as the need for power for data centers arises, we're also not forgetting that there's a need to meet the growing demand on the consumer side with the electrification of everything. So that is very square in the policy discussions in Pennsylvania in particular, but within the PJM grid as a whole. I think you saw President Trump kind of weigh in on this as well, along with Governor Shapiro, trying to resolve that concern. And it is a concern. But the great news is that we know, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, that we have so much of the resource here in the Appalachian Basin that we can meet both demands, demand on the grid side as well as the demand on the growth of the data center side.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, this cold weather is, it's kind of a double-edged sword for everybody. It's great for the natural gas business, right? You burn a lot more gas. Prices have firmed up a little bit, although they fell back down for a little bit too. But this has been a good time for gas producers, right? I wonder if your members are feeling a little better about economics right now.
Yeah, I think there's genuine optimism, and there has been over the last year. And quite frankly, we see that in production levels. We saw a 6% growth in production level from 2024 to 2025 in Pennsylvania, now producing about 7.7 TCF a year. So that in and of itself demonstrates the optimism. The challenge we still have, though, David, is the infrastructure. Yeah. As I look out at a river right now that's frozen. There's 5 bridges that come across this river. If one of those bridges go down, you can get from one side to the other. That's not the infrastructure that we have here in the Northeast. So when cold snaps come along like this, and there may be a problem with one of the pipelines, we don't have the significant infrastructure that perhaps Texas has and it's built out, where you can quickly kind of readjust where you're putting those molecules. So we need more infrastructure in the ground to ensure that we're meeting the demands that are coming. And that's the big focus right now, is making sure that we can get that pipe in the ground, the processing plants, so that we can continue to supply the needed energy for the region.
Yeah, and your state, Ohio, even West Virginia, really, they're kind of these states that are seeing an influx of population from other states and just population growth in general. And you've also become right there in the Pittsburgh area, kind of the center for the data center development, right? And the AI boom there in that region, with the project that was led by Senator, I'm dropping his name.
Senator McCormick.
Yeah, Senator McCormick. God, I'm sorry. That was announced last year. How's all that going? Has been any big snags with the development of that?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Senator McCormick, freshman senator, comes in, and I ran into him in January of last year, right like 2 days after he got sworn in. He said to me, he goes, "I'm going to hold an energy summit. I'm going to put natural gas front and center for the nation." And you hear that and you think, okay. And 6 months later, in July of last year, he put on the Energy Summit in Pittsburgh, announced almost $100 billion of investment into Pennsylvania, most of it surrounding, the AI data center growth, and exciting times right now. And the activity is probably no different than it is in some of the other states, but there's a heightened activity in Pennsylvania because being able to sit right on top of the resource, not have to build out the long haul infrastructure that would be necessary otherwise, is what's really intriguing. So we're starting to see that now come to fruition as developers move forward with their plans. Number of additional announcements have been made with respect to some old generating stations that are being refurbished, whether it's Homer City or others here in Southwest PA, but significant opportunity that it's a great day to be, kind of promoting gas and this new economy that's going to be driven by AI, particularly here in Pennsylvania, because there is excitement, there is a focus on it. And I think there's a commitment at all levels of government, federal, state, local, to really see this come to fruition. And quite frankly, we're seeing the pushback come from the very entities that push back on natural gas development. And they're using the same playbook that they use against natural gas development. So if there's any industry that can be an educator to our developer friends on the AI side of things, it's the natural gas industry, particularly up here in the Appalachian Basin, because we face it every day. We faced it. We understand their playbook. It's all about eliminating fossil fuels, which is a ridiculous base to start from. And so that's what they're starting to see and starting to face.
Well, you have to give the opposition credit, right? They are tireless. if nothing else. I mean, they do cling to the same talking points for long after they're debunked and proven wrong. We were talking before we started recording about the spectacle of the representatives for wind and solar at these legislative hearings after these major winter storms, talking about how solar performed as expected, as it's designed during these winter storms, which means it did nothing. You get nothing out of it, right? And that's what you expect from solar during a winter storm. And saying that with a straight face and great pride, which is pretty extraordinary to me. I'll never forget being down in Austin at the hearing following Winter Storm Uri, where 300 Texans lost their lives, and wind and solar had been the first forms of generation to fall off the Texas grid in that storm. And the solar representative saying exactly that. Yes, solar performed as expected, and everyone in the room laughed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, but they keep saying it as if it's a valid talking point. So they are tireless. It is a crazy goal that they have that can't be achieved, but you can't convince them otherwise. You can't convince them to get off of it. Governor Shapiro is an interesting guy. He's now, I saw a recent poll, he's a potential presidential candidate in 2028. And I know y'all have found some pretty good ways to work with him on issues. I mean, he's a Democrat, but he's been a pretty strong governor just in terms of dealing with the energy business from a standpoint of at least realistic standpoint, right? Is he a guy the industry could work with at a national level, do you think? I don't want to get you off into partisan politics.
No, and it's a great question, David, and it's a question I get asked a lot. I've spent some time down in Houston recently, and that was a lot of my, the operators were asking me that very question. He is the first one to say that he is an all of the above energy governor. We wish he'd be a little more bullish on gas and pragmatic about the role that it plays here in Pennsylvania. He has the ability right now to be one of the most transformative governors in the country if he would just embrace our industry and really help in ensuring that we build out the infrastructure that's needed to secure the economic opportunities that are presented right now. And we just talked about some of those, right? I think Senator McCormick and even Senator Fetterman are trying to work with him to see that come to fruition, particularly Senator McCormick. But sometimes he just has a hard time being able to utter the words natural gas. You said it, David. He wants to be president. He considers himself a viable presidential candidate. He's got a gubernatorial race he's got to get through this year first. And I wouldn't say that that's a slam dunk for him. But he also knows that he's got to get, if he wants to get through a presidential primary, there are political calculations he needs to make in terms of, the environmental groups that are going to be picking winners and losers. So he's been what could be a very transformative governor. He's been reluctant to go there. We've been somewhat disappointed in that. But he hasn't been out there trying to shut us down of late. And I will say we've been concerned with some of the policies that he's certainly promoted and let through. And when I say concerned, I mean serious concerns with them. One of them, for example, would be alternative energy portfolio standards that would basically wall off 80% of the market from natural gas electricity being able to be supplied by utilities. We currently have a 18% mandate on alternative energy portfolio sources. His proposal would basically take that to 50%. He creates a subsidy for some other energy sources, and it leaves coal and gas competing for 18% of the market, which is ridiculous when we produce over 60% of the energy here in Pennsylvania. So policies like those send mixed signals to operators and send mixed signals to the industry.
On the infrastructure question, it's more than just pipelines, right? I mean, obviously you need additional pipeline capacity in the Marcellus, coming out of the Marcellus, but it's more than that, isn't it? I mean, what about LNG? Is there any opportunity for an LNG export facility in the Pennsylvania region anytime soon, do you think?
Yeah, a great question, David, and a lot of conversation at high levels about whether we can site an LNG export facility in Philadelphia. One of the reasons is obviously it's close to the product right here in the Marcellus Shale fields, only 10 60, 80 miles away from some of the richest gas that
Right.
we can produce. And then it's about a third the cost of shipping when you take the product from Philadelphia and go across to our European allies versus trying to get down around the Gulf Coast there. So it reduces costs from about a third. So there's been a lot of conversation about whether, in where to site that in the Philadelphia region. The building trades have been very active with that. The governor's been part of those conversations, investors. So I think there's somewhat optimism, but there's a lot of hurdles to overcome. We talked about those, environmental NGOs that are very active. They're no more active anywhere than they are in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge there. But there is optimism because of the need for LNG and the location to market.
So I want to use that as a way to segue into this question about the European Union. We have this move now in the EU, the European Commission, to start to kind of wean the continent supposedly off of U.S. LNG and look for alternative suppliers, which seems extraordinarily illogical to me, I guess is a good word for it, given their methane reduction and CO2 reduction goals. Don't we produce the cleanest natural gas on earth here in the United States? I mean, basically from the Marcellus Shale, right? Much of which flows to the Gulf Coast to be exported. Isn't it the cleanest natural gas in the world? It
is, and you're certainly, I think you're referring to Dan Jurgensen's, the EU's energy secretary's comments about trying to wean off of U.S. LNG. I found it almost humorous, and I don't mean to denigrate our friends in the EU, but almost humorous for him to suggest that when U.S. exports are over 60% right now, and at the same time, imports to EU are over 60%. And Bloomberg just reported that Russian imports are almost at an all-time high at about 18%. And we know that ban takes effect in less than a year for them to import. So they're going to have to rely on, their allies. And I think it's more political talk than it is anything else. It was directed at some of the president's comments as it relates to Greenland, which is ironic in itself when they're importing more Russian gas right now than ever before with what's going on in Ukraine. So it's unfortunate to hear that. We do have, and getting to your point, we do have the cleanest basin in the country when you look at methane intensity. Those are third-party analyses of what happens within the various basins around the country. Right. And not only, you look at the U.S., the U.S. has some of the cleanest LNG on methane intensity in the world. More than 60% cleaner than Russia. I think Algeria was one of the countries that he targeted as we need to look at Algeria for more imports. Algeria, we're 125% cleaner than Algeria as a country. So their methane regs set standards for what they can import. No country can meet those standards better than the United States, and no play can meet that better than the Appalachian Basin, because we do have the lowest methane intensity of any of the basins in the country. So it's unfortunate to hear that kind of talk when we are here to deliver and serve our friends. And I think, again, it was a more political posturing than anything else. And I think our producers are ready to meet the demands that are going to be there in the future for Europe.
At the same time, though, to me, it's kind of an empty threat from the EU, because even if they were to do that, let's say they were to succeed in doing that, all they would be doing would be reshuffling the trade equations from multiple exporting countries. They would have to obtain the additional LNG from Qatar, Algeria, wherever they get it from. And that just means fewer cargoes from those countries going to Asian markets and African markets, which are exploding for natural gas, which would just mean that U.S. natural gas, more of it, LNG, would flow to Asian and African markets. And so it would be a zero-sum game in which the EU is kind of cutting off its nose to spite its face, to take a poke, I guess, at President Trump and the Greenland thing. But I'm like you, I don't really worry that much about that happening. You just hate to see that kind of rhetoric when it doesn't make any real sense from a business standpoint.
Yeah, I think calmer heads prevail, and we continue to have conversations with the EU, as do our operators. And there's a recognition, I think, when push comes to shove, that U.S. needs to be a significant ally in ensuring that they have their energy resources and energy needs met. And they know that we can do that. They particularly know that we can do that from the basin perspective, given the low intensity that I talked about, because we can meet their EU methane regs and meet those requirements pretty easily here in Pennsylvania. And our operators do. They provide the monitoring, reporting, verification to the MRVs that's required under those new regs, and will continue to do so. We saw I'll keep touting the basins because we're just so proud of it. We saw our methane intensity drop 20% over 2 years, from 22 to 24. And we were already at the lowest. We remain at the lowest. And again, these aren't industry efforts to kind of verify that. These are third-party efforts that are verifying these numbers. So we've got a good story to tell. We've got a good product to sell, and that's why I think our allies understand that and recognize that, and we'll do everything we can to ensure that we're providing them with the energy they need.
Yeah, and of course, the other great advantage for the Marcellus region is the immensity of the resource is so incredible. It's similar situation to the Permian Basin, Texas and New Mexico, and we're seeing these concerns pop up related to the Permian that production has probably peaked, you keep seeing these stories about how all the prime drilling spots have been drilled up now, which I think is a little overblown still in the Permian, but it is what it is. But I just wonder, do you see that the same kind of concerns in the Marcellus, or is it really just, there's not that many active rigs in the Marcellus. It's astonishing to me how the natural gas business in this country continues to increase production with just a little over 100 drilling rigs active, drilling for natural gas in the United States. Are there any concerns that the Marcellus is actually kind of peaked and is on any kind of a decline right now?
Not within our operators.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, we saw production growth of 6% last year. And while we had seen it kind of flatline over previous years, I think more driven by economics, that growth demonstrates that there's still an interest in the ability to continue to ramp up production where necessary. And like everywhere else, we're seeing longer laterals. We're seeing new technologies deployed to be more efficient with the resource. I mean, look, we don't have the luxury up here in this basin, and particularly in Pennsylvania, of being an associated gas play. We're a pure gas play, which means the commodity's got to pay for itself for extraction and production. So as such, there's a keen focus on doing it the most efficient way possible. Our challenge has been the development of the infrastructure. We continuously face a discount in price here in the basin with the trading hubs when compared to NYMEX. On average, we're about 20% below NYMEX. And that is because of the constraints on infrastructure that we've talked about today. And that's why we need to be building out that infrastructure to ensure that, one, the supply can get to market when it's needed to get to market, but two, to make it an even more economical play to even grow that production. But there is the resource is rich. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think our operators recognize that. Most of them are in growth modes.
Well, Jim, I can't thank you enough for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's such a, the Marcellus is just like the greatest natural gas success story in the history of this country, really, onshore. And I just always love talking about it. tell folks how they can follow what you guys are doing, how they can get in touch with the coalition, and people who want to learn more. Where can they go?
Yeah, so you can go to marcelluscoalition.org to learn more about our organization. A lot of real detailed information about the Appalachian Basin, a lot of information about the MSC. We put out about weekly a blog that really hits on some key, whether it's policy issues or economic issues, or to respond to some of the detractors, to really put the facts out there. You can sign up for that blog to get that information on a weekly basis to see what's going on with the MSC and our members and our operators. We've become a go-to resource really in the basin on all energy issues, and we're proud of that. We're obviously bullish on natural gas. We're a natural gas organization, but we also recognize the importance of American energy and the American energy dominance. And we want to be part of that solution, part of that discussion moving forward. MSC's positioned pretty well to do that, and working with our policymakers and other stakeholders to ensure that happens. So marcelluscoalition.org to learn more about us. Sign up for our blog. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. We've got like 63,000 followers. We put out our information there as well. And always feel free to reach out to any of us. We're a small team, we're a mighty team, and we're proud of what we do here at the MSC.
Well, you should be. And I'm jealous of those Facebook numbers, by the way. Thank you, man. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is the Energy Impacts Podcast, and I'm David Blackman signing off.